The first $100,000 is a mathematical barrier most people never cross. Not because they're unlucky, not because the system is rigged against them. They fail because they don't understand the psychology of their own stupidity. I've spent 70 years watching intelligent people sabotage themselves with the same predictable mental errors. And I can tell you this with certainty. Your brain is wired to keep you poor. Let me be direct here. You're fighting millions of years of evolution that programmed you for immediate gratification. Your ancestors who saved berries for next winter didn't pass on more genes than those who ate them right away. But we don't live in caves anymore. The rules changed, but your brain didn't get the memo. That's the first problem you need to solve. Capital is freedom. Capital is leverage. Capital is the difference between being a biological machine, trading hours for dollars, and being a rational agent capable of making decisions without needing a gun to your head. Without that first 100,000, you're just another worker praying your health holds and your boss stays happy. One medical emergency, one corporate restructuring, one economic sneeze, and you're finished. I'm not exaggerating. I saw this during the Great Depression, every recession since, right through 2008, when people lost everything. People with capital had options. They could buy assets when everyone else was panicking. They could wait out the storm. They could take intelligent risks because they had a margin of safety. People without capital got crushed, not because they were stupid, but because they were powerless. Here's what nobody wants to hear. Getting to that first 100,000 has almost nothing to do with intelligence. I've known brilliant people who died broke and mediocre minds who built fortunes. The difference wasn't IQ, it was rationality. It was the ability to recognize and neutralize the psychological tendencies that lead humans to do idiotic things with money. Let me explain what you're really fighting. You think you're fighting low wages or bad luck or the system. Wrong. You're fighting yourself. You're fighting what I call the psychology of human misjudgment. 25 built-in tendencies that evolution gave you to survive in tribes, not to accumulate capital in modern markets. First tendency that's destroying you. Reward and punishment, super response. You're a simple creature. You do what gets rewarded and avoid what gets punished. Sounds reasonable, except modern society rewards consumption and punishes saving. You buy a new car and everyone compliments you. You drive a 15-year-old beater while saving aggressively and people think you're pathetic. Your entire social environment is punishing exactly the behavior that would make you rich. Every advertisement, every Instagram post, every conversation with your coworkers reinforces the wrong incentives. Your brain evolved to care desperately about what the tribe thinks because getting kicked out of the tribe meant death. So you spend money you don't have to impress people you don't like. And you wonder why you're broke at 40. This isn't philosophy. This is biology working against your financial interests. Second tendency, social proof. Humans are copying machines. If everyone around you is leasing BMWs and taking vacations to Europe, your brain interprets that as correct behavior, never mind that they're drowning in debt. Your subconscious sees the crowd moving in one direction and screams at you to follow. That's how you end up with negative net worth while trying to keep up with your neighbors. I'll tell you something that might sound harsh, but will save you decades of pain. Most people are financially incompetent. Most people work 40 years and have nothing to show for it. Most people are following a script written by marketers who want to separate them from every dollar they earn. If you follow the crowd, you get the crowd's results. A lifetime of financial anxiety and a retirement dependent on government checks. Third tendency, envy and jealousy. This one is particularly destructive. You see someone with a bigger house or a nicer car, and something primitive in your brain starts howling. That howling will cost you everything if you listen to it. I've watched envy destroy more wealth than bad investments ever could. People making $200,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck because they can't stand that a colleague bought a boat. Here's the inversion principle I want you to burn into your mind. Instead of asking, how do I get rich? Ask what keeps people poor. The answer is obvious when you look around. People stay poor because they can't delay gratification. They stay poor because they care what strangers think. They stay poor because they let their emotions override their ability to do basic math. The math is brutally simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference in productive assets. Wait, that's it. That's the whole game. But simple doesn't mean easy, because you're fighting a brain that wants pleasure now, status now, comfort now. Your brain is screaming at you to optimize for the present while your future self pays the price. Fourth tendency, contrast, misreaction. Your brain doesn't evaluate things in absolute terms. It evaluates by comparison. You feel rich until you meet someone richer. You feel poor until you see someone poorer. This tendency makes you act irrationally about money in predictable ways. You get a 20% raise and immediately upgrade your lifestyle by 25% because you're comparing to a reference point that has nothing to do with rationality. Let me give you a specific example. When Buffett and I were young, we didn't compare ourselves to successful people. We compared our choices to opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on consumption was a dollar that couldn't compound for decades. That's the rational comparison, but almost nobody thinks that way. They're too busy comparing their car to their neighbor's car. Fifth tendency, deprival superreaction. Humans hate losing what they have far more than they enjoy gaining what they don't have. That's why people hold losing stocks too long and sell winning stocks too early. That's why they can't cut unnecessary expenses from their budget. They view canceling a luxury subscription as a painful loss, even though never having subscribed in the first place wouldn't have hurt at all. Your brain reacts to giving up your daily coffee ritual like someone stealing food from your mouth. Meanwhile, you're spending $1,500 a year. Compounded over 20 years, you'll have wasted $50,000 because your brain can't handle the feeling of giving something up. Let me explain compound interest, since everyone pretends to understand it, but nobody actually does. Compound interest is the most powerful force in finance, but it's completely useless if you have nothing to compound. That's the tragedy. People read about Buffett getting 20% compound returns over 60 years, and they think, great, I'll do that too. Except they have $500 and 3 credit cards at 18% interest. They don't have a compound interest problem. They have a capital formation problem. Here's how compound interest works in practice. At the beginning, it's insulting. You save $6,000. You earn 10%. That's $600 before taxes. Your car breaks down and it costs you $900. You feel like a fool for bothering. This is where 90% of people quit. They can't handle the psychological pain of watching small numbers grow slowly while life keeps punching them in the face. I didn't get excited about compound interest in my 20s. I ground it out, suffered through it, and watched returns so small they wouldn't pay for a vacation. The discipline to keep going anyway, that's where fortunes come from, not from brilliance. From the stubborn refusal to quit when quitting makes emotional sense. Sixth tendency, availability misweighing. Your brain overvalues vivid recent examples and underweights statistical reality. You know someone who got rich on crypto, so you think that's a viable path, ignoring the thousands who went broke. You remember the investment tip that worked and forget the 10 that didn't. This tendency makes you chase performance and buy last year's winners. The rational approach is to ignore stories and trust systems, but humans aren't rational. We're story-driven creatures, and stories constantly mislead us about probabilities. Every time a lottery winner shows up on TV, millions of people waste money on tickets because the vivid story drowns out the mathematical reality. Let me give you the framework I use. I call it inversion. Instead of asking, what should I do to succeed, I ask, what should I avoid to not fail? The second question is far more valuable because major disasters come from a few categories of stupidity that anyone with discipline can avoid. Avoiding stupidity is more important than seeking brilliance. That's not modesty, that's mathematics. If you avoid disasters, compound interest takes care of itself. But one major mistake can erase decades of discipline. I've watched this happen to people smarter than you'll ever be. They got clever, they got greedy, or they got careless. And 40 years of capital accumulation disappeared in one stupid decision. Let me spell out how stupidity manifests in practice. Stupidity is borrowing money to buy depreciating assets. Stupidity is carrying credit card debt while pretending to be an investor. Stupidity is thinking you can outperform professionals who dedicate 80 hours a week to studying markets. Stupidity is buying a house you can't afford because you're afraid of being priced out of real estate forever. These aren't edge cases. This is what most people do. Seventh tendency, bad influence from authority. You trust authority figures even when they're wrong. Your brain evolved this tendency because in tribal contexts, challenging the chief got you killed. But in modern finance, authority figures are usually trying to sell you something. The financial advisor gets commissions. The media needs sensational headlines. The economist is promoting his book. They're all optimizing for their own interests, not yours. But your brain keeps treating them like tribal elders who care about your well-being. Let me be blunt about financial advisors. Most of them are mediocre salespeople who couldn't beat the market if their lives depended on it. They'll charge you 1% annually to put you in expensive mutual funds that underperform index funds. Over 30 years, that 1% fee compounds into you retiring with 30% less money. But they have a nice office and wear a suit, so your brain screams, trust the authority while they quietly rob you. The rational move is simple. Buy low-cost index funds. Hold them forever. Ignore everything else. But that advice doesn't make anyone a profit except you. So nobody with influence will say it out loud. They'll complicate it, add caveats, sell newsletters, and convince you that investing requires expertise you don't have. It doesn't. It requires discipline you probably lack. But that's a different problem. Eighth tendency, doubt avoidance. Your brain hates uncertainty. When you don't know something, you experience psychological pain. So you rush to eliminate doubt by making a decision. Any decision, even if it's a bad decision. That's why people panic sell during market crashes. The uncertainty about whether it will recover is unbearable. So they sell at the bottom just to stop feeling the discomfort. I've lived through more market crashes than most people have birthdays. Same thing happens every time. Smart people who understand compound interest intellectually lose their minds completely when their portfolio drops 30%. The emotional pain overrides logic, and they do exactly what guarantees permanent loss. They sell. Here's what you need to understand. Market volatility isn't a bug, it's the feature that generates returns. Stocks pay a premium for enduring psychological discomfort. If stock investing was pleasant and easy, they'd return 2% like bonds. They return 10% because most people can't handle watching their net worth swing wildly. That volatility is your compensation for being rational when others panic. But your brain doesn't think in 30-year time frames. It thinks in now. When the market drops 20%, your amygdala lights up like you're being chased by a predator. Every instinct screams, danger, escape, do something. The rational move is to do nothing or better, yet buy more. But rationality feels like stepping off a cliff when your emotions are screaming at you. That's why I keep hammering on psychology instead of investment strategy. Strategy is trivial. Buy productive assets. Hold them. Psychology is where everyone fails. You're not fighting the market. You're fighting millions of years of programming that never had to deal with stock portfolios and compound interest. Ninth tendency, incentive-caused bias. People predictably behave irrationally when their paycheck depends on it. The realtor tells you to buy now because prices will never be lower. The mortgage broker gets you qualified for the biggest loan possible. The car salesman explains why leasing makes sense. None of them are lying exactly. They're just thinking whatever keeps them employed. Your own incentives distort your thinking too. You want to believe you deserve that vacation. You want to believe the expensive car is justified because you work hard. You want to believe your job is secure, so you don't need a big emergency fund. These aren't malicious desires, they're human, but they'll keep you poor if you let them override arithmetic. The way I've always dealt with this is by creating counter-incentives. Whenever I feel tempted to spend money on some nonsense, I calculate what that money would be worth invested for 30 years. That BMW doesn't cost $40,000. It costs $200,000 in retirement money. When you frame it that way, driving the old Beta suddenly looks a lot more attractive. 10th tendency, self-serving bias. You believe you're smarter, more competent, and luckier than you actually are. 90% of people think they're above average drivers. 90% of investors believe they can beat the market. This tendency makes you overconfident and vulnerable to mistakes that someone with accurate self-assessment would avoid. I've known a lot of brilliant people. I've been lucky enough to work with some of the brightest minds in business. But I've never met anyone smart enough to consistently beat markets through trading. The math is against you. The fees are against you. The professionals are against you. And your own psychology is against you. Yet people keep trying because they can't imagine they're not special. Here's what being special actually means. Special is having the discipline to live below your means for a decade. Special is continuing to dollar cost average when your portfolio drops 40%. Special is ignoring the hot stock tip from your brother-in-law. That's special because almost nobody can do it, but it's not sexy. So people keep chasing the fantasy of getting rich through cleverness instead of patience. Let me talk about debt, because this is where I see the most stupidity. Debt is the opposite of compound interest. When you have capital invested, compound interest multiplies in your favor. When you have debt, it compounds against you. An 18% credit card is compounding your poverty while you sleep. I've watched people making $100,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck because they financed everything. The car, the furniture, the vacation, even daily expenses on credit cards they can't pay off. They think they're living well. They're actually building a prison one monthly payment at a time. Here's the math everyone ignores. If you're carrying credit card debt at 18% while investing in stocks, hoping for 10% returns, you're paying an 8% penalty to feel like an investor. That's not sophistication. That's delusion. The rational move is obvious. Eliminate all debt before investing a penny. But that means admitting you can't afford your lifestyle, and people will do anything to avoid that admission. 11th tendency, reciprocation tendency. When someone gives you something, you feel obligated to give back. Salespeople know this. They offer free samples, free trials, free consultations. Then your brain feels like you owe them something. That's how people end up buying things they don't need from people they just met. Credit card companies have perfected this. They offer rewards points, cash back, airport lounge access. You feel like they're being generous. Meanwhile, they're charging merchants 3%, and those merchants raise prices to compensate. So you're paying for your own rewards. Plus, the psychological game of accumulating points makes you spend more. They're not giving you anything. They're manipulating your reciprocation tendency to extract more spending. I don't play these games. Never optimize my spending for credit card points. Never cared about status or perks. The mental energy people waste gaming loyalty programs would be better spent figuring out how to earn more or spend less. But that's harder. So they focus on getting an extra 0.5% cash back while missing the bigger opportunities. 12th tendency, excessive self-regard. You think you're special. You think the rules don't apply to you. You think you'll be the one who gets rich day trading or flipping houses or starting a drop shipping business. This tendency makes you vulnerable to every get-rich-quick scheme that comes along because they all tell you what you want to hear. You're smart enough to beat the system. Let me tell you a secret. The system beats almost everyone. The people who get rich do it through capital accumulation, a boring, unglamorous process over decades. They're not special. They're disciplined. There's a difference. Being special means having unique talents. Discipline means doing the obvious, even when it's emotionally difficult. The first 100,000 isn't about being special. It's about not being stupid. Don't finance depreciating assets. Don't carry high-interest debt. Don't inflate your lifestyle with every raise. Don't chase performance. Don't panic sell during downturns. If you can avoid those mistakes, you'll accumulate capital. It won't be fast, it won't be exciting, but it will work. Let me address the timeline because this is where people's expectations destroy them. Building 100,000 from scratch takes most people 7 to 10 years of aggressive saving. That's not a guess, that's math. If you save $1,000 a month and earn 7% returns, you'll hit it in about 8 years. Most people can't handle 8 years of discipline. They want it faster, so they start looking for shortcuts. They discover options trading, crypto, some guru selling a course on passive income. They convince themselves they can hack the system. Then they lose money, get discouraged, and quit entirely. They would have been better off accepting the timeline and just grinding through it. The timeline feels unfair. I understand that. You work hard, you sacrifice, and for years it feels like you're getting nowhere. Your friends are posting vacation photos while you're eating rice and beans. Your co-workers are driving new cars while you're still in that old beater. The social pressure to quit is immense. But here's what they won't tell you. Most of those people posting vacation photos are drowning in debt. That co-worker with the new car just signed a 6-year loan. They look successful. They're trapped. 13th tendency, liking tendency. You do business with people you like even when it costs you money. You buy from the friendly salesman. You hire your friend's son. You invest in your cousin's company. Your brain prioritizes social comfort over rational decision-making, and it costs you a fortune over a lifetime. I made plenty of mistakes in business, but I learned early to separate liking from competence. I don't care if someone is charming at dinner parties if they can't deliver results. Most people never learn that distinction. They keep hiring incompetent people they like and wonder why nothing works. The path to 100,000 requires you to be ruthlessly honest about performance, starting with your own. Are you actually saving aggressively or making excuses? Are you avoiding stupid debt or financing your lifestyle? Are you holding your investments through volatility or checking your portfolio daily and panicking? Most people lie to themselves. They say they're investing when they're really just gambling. They say they're building wealth when they're really just treading water. They say they'll start saving seriously next year. Next year never comes. The calendar keeps turning and they stay broke. Let me explain how discipline actually manifests, because I don't think people understand it. Discipline is driving past the dealership when your bonus hits. Discipline is saying no to the vacation your friends are planning. Discipline is watching your portfolio drop 30% and buying more anyway. Discipline is explaining to your spouse why you're not renovating the house, even though you technically could afford it. None of this is pleasant. Discipline doesn't create Instagram moments. It creates something far more valuable. Optionality. When you have capital, you have options. You can leave a toxic job. You can start a business. You can buy assets when everyone else is panicking. You can take intelligent risks. Without capital, you take whatever life gives you and smile while it happens. 14th tendency, stress influence. When you're under pressure, your brain defaults to primitive behaviors. You make emotional decisions. You seek comfort. You abandon long-term thinking. That's why most people's finances collapse during a crisis. Stress overrides their rational planning, and they do whatever alleviates immediate pain. I saw this in 2008. People with substantial portfolios panicked and sold everything when the market crashed. They couldn't handle the stress of watching their net worth collapse. If they'd done nothing, they would have recovered everything within a few years. Instead, they locked in permanent losses because stress made them stupid. The solution isn't to not be afraid. The solution is to build systems that protect you from your own stress response. Automate your savings so you don't have to think about it. Set up automatic investing to keep buying even during market crashes. Create rules in advance about when you'll sell so stress doesn't override your logic. Most people don't have systems. They wing it. They tell themselves they'll be rational when it matters. Then stress hits and they discover they're not as rational as they believed. By the time they realize it, the damage is done. 15th tendency, availability misweighing combined with vivid evidence. You remember dramatic stories and ignore statistical reality. You know someone who got rich in real estate, so you think that's the path. You heard about someone who lost everything in the market, so you avoid stocks. Your brain is collecting evidence completely wrong, prioritizing stories over data. The data is clear. Major stock market indices have grown at roughly 10% compound over a century. Real estate returns are lower when you factor in maintenance, taxes, and transaction costs. But real estate feels safer because you can touch it. And everyone has stories about the uncle who made a fortune. Those stories are drowning out the math that should guide your decisions. I'm not saying don't buy real estate. I'm saying don't let vivid anecdotes override statistical reality. The diversified, boring approach beats the exciting, narrative-focused approach almost every time. But boring doesn't sell. Boring doesn't go viral. So you're surrounded by exciting stories about exceptional cases, while the boring winners accumulate quietly. Let me explain what $100,000 actually means in practice. It's not retirement. It's not financial independence. In absolute terms, it's not even that much money. It's proof you can control yourself. Proof you can delay gratification. Proof you can accumulate capital in a world designed to separate you from every dollar you earn. Once you prove that to yourself, the next 100,000 comes faster. The psychology changes. You're not fighting yourself as much because you've built the mental muscle. You've established the patterns. You survived the boring years and watched compound interest start to work. The second 100,000 typically takes half the time. You're saving more because you're earning more. Your existing capital is compounding. The math starts working for you instead of against you. By the time you hit 500,000, the annual returns exceed your salary by a lot. That's when people start calling you lucky. They don't see the decade of discipline that built the foundation. 16th tendency, mental accounting. You treat different pools of money differently based on arbitrary mental categories. Your tax refund feels like free money, so you spend it. Your salary feels substantial, so you're more careful. But money is money. $1 from your refund equals $1 from your paycheck. Yet you treat them completely differently. This tendency makes people act irrationally about windfalls. They get a bonus and immediately spend it on luxuries because it feels like found money. If they were rational, they'd recognize that bonus as a concentrated opportunity to accelerate toward 100,000. Instead, they compartmentalize it as extra and waste it. I never thought that way. Every dollar has the same job. Compound or purchase necessities. Doesn't matter where it came from. The bonus, the refund, the birthday check from grandma, it all goes to the same place. Invested capital growing quietly while everyone else is at the mall. 17th tendency, inconsistency avoidance. Once you commit to an identity or position, your brain resists changing it. If you think of yourself as someone who's not good with money or who can't save, you'll keep acting according to that identity even when it's destroying you. Your brain would rather be consistently wrong than admit you need to change. That's why I don't believe in financial resolutions. People decide they'll start saving in January. They last 6 weeks, then quit. Next January, same resolution, same result. They're trying to change behavior without changing identity. Doesn't work. The change that matters is recognizing you're not bad with money. You're just operating with brain firmware designed for a different environment. By understanding the psychological tendencies working against you, you can build countermeasures. You're not changing your personality, you're just outsmarting your own predictable irrationality. Let me talk about the finish line, because people misunderstand what happens when you hit 100,000. You don't suddenly get rich. You don't quit your job. You don't buy a boat. What you do is absolutely nothing different. You keep saving. You keep investing. You keep living below your means, because 100,000 isn't the end goal. It's mile marker 1 of a marathon. This is where people sabotage themselves. They hit the target and treat it like an excuse to celebrate. They inflate their lifestyle as a reward for their discipline. They just spent 10 years building capital, and they destroy the momentum right when compound interest finally starts getting interesting. It's like climbing a mountain for hours, then rolling back down on purpose because you're tired. The rational response to hitting 100,000 is nothing. No celebration, no lifestyle inflation, no relaxing the discipline. You just keep grinding because now the math is finally in your favor. The returns are becoming significant. Compound interest is showing its power. This is when you accelerate, not coast. 18th tendency, fairness tendency. You expect the world to be fair. You think hard work should be rewarded proportionally. You believe doing the right thing should lead to success. This tendency sets you up for disappointment because the world doesn't work that way. Lots of hard-working people stay poor. Lots of lazy people inherit wealth. Fairness is a human construct, not a law of nature. The game of capital accumulation isn't fair. It's just math. If you save and invest, compound interest works. If you don't, it doesn't. Your level of effort, your moral worth, your intentions, none of that matters. The math doesn't care if you deserve success. It only cares if you feed it capital and time. I never expected fairness. I expected probability. I expected that rational behavior repeated over long periods would produce predictable results. That's not fair. It's just arithmetic. But people keep expecting the universe to reward their suffering and get confused when it doesn't. The universe doesn't reward suffering. It rewards capital formation and patience. Let me give you the final framework, the one that ties everything together. I call it the latticework of mental models. You need to understand psychology, mathematics, economics, and biology to make good financial decisions. Most people operate with 1 or 2 mental models from whatever field they studied. That's not enough. You need to understand compound interest from a mathematical perspective. You need to understand incentives from an economic perspective. You need to understand cognitive biases from a psychological perspective. You need to understand evolutionary mismatch from a biological perspective. When you combine these models, you'll see clearly why most people fail with money and what you need to do differently. Psychology teaches you which mistakes to avoid. Math shows you what works. Economics explains how systems function. Biology explains why your instincts mislead you. Put them together and you have a framework for rational decision-making that most people never develop. This isn't complicated. A smart high school student could understand every concept I've discussed. But understanding intellectually is different from implementing behaviorally. Everyone knows they should save more and spend less. Almost nobody does it. The gap between knowing and doing is where fortunes get lost. 19th tendency, senescence, misinfluence. Your brain's capabilities decline with age, but your confidence doesn't decline with it. That makes older people vulnerable to scams and bad decisions, but it also affects younger people who assume they'll always have time to save later. Your body and your mind are perishable assets. Every year you wait to start is a year you can't get back. I've watched people waste decades telling themselves they'll start saving seriously when they hit some milestone. After they get the promotion, after the kids finish college, after they pay off the car. That milestone never arrives. Or when it does, a new excuse replaces the old one. Then they hit 65 and panic because they have nothing. Those years don't come back. Compound interest requires time, and time is the only resource you can't buy. Starting at 25 versus 35 versus 45 makes an enormous difference. Not because of the extra savings, but because of the extra compounding periods. Every year, you delay costs exponentially more than the year before. The cruelest part is when you're young and time is your greatest advantage, you don't feel the urgency. When you're old and feel the urgency, the time is gone. That's why I hammer young people to start immediately, not next year, not after they pay off that one debt. Now, today. Because you're wasting your most valuable resource while waiting for perfect conditions that will never arrive. Let me close with the only advice that matters. If you want to build wealth, you need to do 3 things consistently. Avoid catastrophic stupidity. Live below your means. Invest the difference in productive assets. That's it. Everything else is noise. Avoiding catastrophic stupidity means no high-interest debt, no gambling disguised as investing, no buying depreciating assets with borrowed money, no panic selling during crashes. Just don't blow yourself up. That eliminates 90% of financial disasters right there. Living below your means doesn't mean being cheap, it means being rational. Every dollar spent impressing people you don't like is a dollar that doesn't turn into freedom. Choose freedom over status. Choose optionality over comfort. Choose long-term compounding over momentary pleasure. The math doesn't care about your feelings. Investing in productive assets means buying things that generate returns. Stocks in good companies, index funds, real estate that produces cash flow. Not collectibles, not crypto, not whatever your buddy is excited about. Boring, productive assets that have compounded wealth for centuries. They'll keep compounding for you if you let them. The first 100,000 is the wall. It's a test of whether you can control yourself long enough for the math to save you. Most people fail this test. They don't have the discipline, the patience, or the rationality to get there. They spend their lives making excuses for why they can't save while buying things that keep them poor. But if you can pass this test, if you can accumulate that first block of capital through years of unglamorous discipline, everything changes. The compound interest curve starts bending upward. Your money starts earning more than you can save. The psychological burden eases because you're finally seeing progress that matches your effort. And here's what nobody tells you. After you've accumulated real capital, after you've watched compound interest actually work over decades, you stop wanting the things that used to tempt you. That luxury car looks like waste. The expensive vacation looks like compound interest you'll never get back. Your values change because you've experienced something more satisfying than consumption, the security and freedom that capital provides. That's the real reward. Not the number in your account, though that's nice. The reward is the psychological shift from being a consumer vulnerable to every ad and social pressure to being a capital allocator, making rational decisions based on long-term thinking. You become a different kind of person. So, here's my final message. Get that first 100,000 by any legal, honest means necessary. Cut your expenses to the bone. Increase your income however you can. Ignore everyone trying to sell you something. Ignore everyone judging your old car and small apartment. Just grind. Because until you have capital, you're not playing the wealth-building game. You're playing the survival game. And the survival game is rigged against you. Any emergency can destroy you. Any economic crisis can ruin you. Any bad boss can control you. But when you have capital, the game changes completely. You have a margin of safety. You have options. You have time to make good decisions instead of desperate ones. You're still not rich, but you're no longer powerless. And that difference is everything. Don't expect it to be easy. Don't expect it to be quick. Don't expect anyone to help you or cheer for you while you do it. Building wealth is a lonely, boring, unglamorous journey that takes years before you see meaningful results. Most people quit because they can't handle the psychology of delayed gratification. But if you can handle it, if you can outlast your own impatience and irrationality, the math will work. It always has. Compound interest doesn't care about your background or your luck or your connections. It only cares if you feed it capital and time. Give it both, and it will make you rich. Fail to give it either, and you'll stay poor no matter how smart you are. The choice is yours. You can keep making excuses. You can keep spending everything you earn. Keep waiting for someone to rescue you. Or you can accept that the game is simple but hard and start playing it seriously today. Not next month, not next year, today. Because every day you wait is a day of compound interest you'll never get back. And at the end of your life, you'll either look back and appreciate the discipline that gave you freedom, or you'll look back and regret the excuses that kept you trapped. So stop reading, stop researching, stop looking for shortcuts. Just start. Save aggressively, invest rationally, wait patiently. The first 100,000 is the hardest, but the struggle is worth it. And on the other side of it is a life most people never get to live. A life where money works for you instead of you working for money. Sonet 4.5 Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erro.